The Getaway is one of my favorite games of all time. I've established how much I love it and talked so much about it on my channel and on the Return to London campaign page. It's been on a mini hiatus after the disappointing no-show or recognition for its 20th anniversary. We reviewed the first game and have yet to review the sequel. I'm putting that off as much as I can, to be honest, but it is something we will get to. Today I just wanted to talk about the history and the success, the greatness, and at times genius of The Getaway, and the underrated importance of the game, and being completely honest about a return to this gritty world that we were blessed with so many years ago. The Getaway was first released in 2002. It was in development for such a long time, originally planned for the PS1 before many changes happened and eventually came out on the PS2. The game was heavily advertised to be a movie-like experience and heavily immersive. It absolutely was. This game was amazing and ahead of its time. The amount of effort and tech that went into the game was crazy. Full-on motion capture and very detailed facial animations, live-action trailers with the actors, and remaking cutscenes in a live-action setting as well. They all did a fantastic job, and you could even find some of them around still. I hope one day I'm able to bring one of them here for an interview, but that's for a different time. The game was a huge success, selling nearly 4 million units and having a modest rating overall, obviously getting a sequel and still having a very loyal fan base. When the game first released, there was obviously mixed reception, and a lot of it had to do with the controls more than anything. It really was a clunky game, but surrounding it all was an amazing, dark, gritty, crime-ridden London that was extremely immersive and kept you hooked into the action of it all. This game was a map of London on a PlayStation 2 disc. The game ended up in development hell too, originally releasing with the PS2 in 2000, but was delayed for 27 months due to the difficulties recreating the world of London. The team took 500,000 reference photos to recreate it all. The grooves on the back of the disc is also a digital map of London, so I'm not over-exaggerating when I say this. The recreation of London was unlike anything we've seen at the time. The effort, the graphics, and the detail put into it all was on a completely different level. It was an absolute marvel at the time. The writing and story for the game also had a lot of depth and action. The amount of things that you had to pull and do playing as Mark was batshit crazy, and it really kept you hooked in on the action. From chasing down the kidnappers, to ramming a prison van off the road to release a gang member, to murdering the head of the flying squad police, to going on a boat loaded with explosives and saving your son from certain death, and yourself from all the gangs you were blackmailed into attacking. There's no shortage of insanity, action, and depth. The icing on the cake and what gave it more depth was splitting the game in half, and allowing you to play as Frank Carter of the Flying Squad, seeing it all from his perspective, and the inner workings of the crime lords in London, and who was involved, and who was pulling the strings. It added another layer to the story. The chaos Mark was causing, how it unfolded on Carter's end, knowing the fate the other gang members suffered, and Frank himself fighting against adversity and constantly being hunted down and slammed by his two-faced chief McCormack. Character development wasn't really much of a thing, unfortunately, and it really would have elevated everything into a different stratosphere at that point. The game has done so many things ahead of its time, even if some of it wasn't properly executed, like the movie-like approach by removing maps, health bars, and the other things from the screen. Relying on the church signals of your car to get you places was really neat, but unfortunately wasn't properly executed. The game did many things to truly make it an experience we haven't seen before at the time, and it delivered on many things in that department. Relying on subtle cues like the churn signals to get where you're trying to go, them reloading the guns and seeing the clips fall out, them getting weaker, slower, and sluggish when taking too much damage, and needing to lean against the wall to recover and watching the bloodstains disappear worked for the most part, even if some of it was as goofy as it sounds. The development team found ways around everything you could imagine. I've always wondered how they kept it all so connected and avoiding constant loading screens. From Gavin Moore, the director of animation for the game, said, "We didn't want to break the recreation of London into areas and impose loading times," says Gavin. "We wanted the player to remain immersed in the game. But there was no hard drive on the PS2 and no way to load the whole city into memory. So the engine was completely rewritten to stream geometry and textures of areas that the player was close to, which was groundbreaking at the time. To load and stream the data that fast put a lot of pressure on the PS2 disk drive, so the data for the city was burnt onto the disk in sequential order to reduce the strain. It really goes to show the amount of effort, time, tech, and loopholes needed to make it all possible. They've assembled a great set of actors as well. That brought the game and characters to life very well. Hearing the desperation and shock from Mark in many of these missions, feeling the obsessive, angry, and desperate Frank Carter to put an end to the madness by the Jolsons, and dealing with his two-faced boss was remarkable. You had big bosses like Charlie Jolson in the game playing the big gangster so well in the story, and other members that were along with him. Everyone played their roles so well. Charlie's right-hand man Eyebrows being sarcastic and a cunning member, Charlie's nephew Jake being clueless, reckless, and absolutely mental, and Charlie himself being the big man pulling the strings and lurking in the shadows watching it all unfold. He never quite made it out, however, and the ones who got the last laugh ended up being the man he so desperately hated and wanted to bring down completely, Mark Hammond. To many, The Getaway was completely forgotten about and didn't leave any type of mark on the industry or future PlayStation projects, but they couldn't be more wrong. Diving deeper into this game and seeing what it did and what it set out at the time, you can clearly see the foundation it laid for titles we know and love so much. The Getaway was one of the first games to be so movie-like and realistic and paved the way for cinematic masterpieces like Uncharted and other PS2 classics we know and love. It's games like these that needed to take big risks like this in order to evolve the industry and create bigger change. The Getaway did just that. Look back for yourselves. There wasn't many games doing what The Getaway was doing at the time. It used so much tech that not many were using in games, and laid great groundwork at the time to make games more immersive and connected. It fired on all cylinders. The game was completely ahead of its time in many aspects. It went on to become one of the most successful games on PS2, and influenced the third-person action-adventure genre in the coming years. The game went all out with cinematic, live-action trailers, and advertisements, and paved the way for many in the industry to do the same. The impact from the teams themselves was felt. Key members having a big part in successful games later in life like LA Noire, Concrete Genie, and Puppeteer later on in their careers. The team still carried the torch and brought even more cinematic, crime-ridden masterpieces like Blood and Truth for the PSVR into the mix, even reusing all the assets from the PS2 game into these new projects. As mentioned before, The Getaway got a sequel and a spin-off on the PSP called Gangs of London. Many may think I'm reaching talking about some of these things, but I promise you I'm not. Without The Getaway, we wouldn't have many of the cinematic masterpieces we have now. The Getaway laid the groundwork for this type of stuff, and it barely got the respect it deserves for doing so. The Getaway hasn't been around since 2004. The game almost got a third game on the PS3, but was ultimately put on hold, and eventually cancelled so the team could focus on gimmicky games like SingStar, or other PlayStation Move titles. They also cancelled another game called 8 Days. Over the years, there's been hints and teases about a possible return to the series, and the Return to London campaign page I created kinda brought awareness to it, having multiple articles being written on it and more. It wasn't just me and a few friends catching on, but soon many others. Even former employees giving hints that something could be brewing. The unfortunate reality, though, is that the chances are very slim, especially with the no-show and zero acknowledgement when the game hit 20 years old. It was acknowledged by PlayStation and Sony London on its 15th birthday in 2017, but nothing more. There isn't a better time than now for The Getaway to return. With GTA as well remaining absent for a while still, the game has an advantage. Bringing back the first game in a remade and revamped version would absolutely leave a mark, and not only bring out even more old fans, but introduce a new audience to this wonderful game as well. With today's tech, it would be much easier to do and handle. Even with GTA 6 coming out in the next handful of years, a Getaway remake would still sell and would still have impact. The Getaway is something PlayStation is missing. We have the post-apocalyptic worlds with The Last of Us, fantasy epics and worlds with God of War, games based on some real history and wide-open war-torn worlds like Ghost of Tsushima. Uncharted wrapped up, but that was the action-packed adventure game. PlayStation needs something like The Getaway again. An action-packed, crime-ridden open-world game with the unbelievable photorealistic world built years ago being brought back to life, revamped, and transformed would do wonders. And it would, honestly, sell even more than it did before. It can break the mold for Sony and bring back a layer and element that has been missing for a while for them. There isn't a better time than now to do it. And while the chances remain slim, I won't stop loving, talking, and advocating for it to one day return to us again. I speak on revamping The Getaway, and realizing now I must revamp and bring Return to London out of its hiatus. I hope you all will join me there, and stick with me here for more videos like these, reviews, and other fun content that I do have in store. No matter what happens, we still have the memories of our favorite games, and will continue to cherish everything forever said games have brought us. I have a long history with The Getaway, a lot of amazing memories, and I go years back with it. I'm grateful for it, and like many, hope to see it return one day. and get the respect it deserves and never fully received at the time. Thank you guys for watching. Jaybills Games signing off. I'll see you all in the next video.